Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
And welcome back, everybody. We are going to dig into something today that's going to be extremely impactful, so important in your personal relationships, specifically marriages or partnerships. Communication is so key. It's kind of rhetorical that I say that, but a lot of times we don't really dig deep into that. He does, and very gratified to have him with us. He has been working with people for many years. He's got a master's degree in counseling, works with couples all the time, even before they get married. And we're going to bring him in here today. Paul Zohob joins us on the program. Paul, welcome. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Let's hope it's a positive new year for many of us in terms of our relationships. And last time you got together with us, it was about communication. Can we recap a couple of things that were talked about?
Briefly, we've become aware that people don't learn to communicate from schools, and we do a rather poor job learning it from our parents, because what do we use for models of relationships? What our parents did or didn't do, and how well they didn't do it. Sometimes, often very badly. And then you have two couples with two childhoods and two sets of experiences, and somehow we're trying to figure our way to a relationship that'll last. And we are poorly prepared for that. And that's what I do. In about 5 sessions of an hour and a half each, they'll learn what they need to know to go on to their 50th wedding anniversary, and their children along with them as well.
Not to put it in one category, but would you say that marriages derail because of a lack of proper communication overall?
Yes, first and foremost. As I might have mentioned last time, that people tend to react. Reacting is great when the light is red. You don't need to think about it. You want to stop. But in a relationship, we're obliged to pause, reflect, and choose. And one of the first things they learn from me, from my podcast, from our videos, is the value of a yes and an and. You say something to me, I'll say, yes, and when's the best time for us to talk? How about breakfast? Yes, and how about scrambled eggs? Yes, and how can I best help you? So a yes helps us know that we've been heard. Yes. It flips the switch from react to respond, and the and provides us that grace moment to choose what's next. Yes, and. Parents, children, coworkers, marriages, customers, clients, and patients. It's the same. You start a sentence with yes, you're on your way.
I'm so on your page, and I've come to, in the last number of years, substituting the word but for and. So if somebody says something to you, instead of responding, yeah, but, or if you say to somebody, I really like your hair, but maybe you might want to get rid of the word but. Use the word and. And it actually goes back to kids. If you look at little kids and they get excited about talking about something, there's no buts. It's, and I went to the park, and I had ice cream, and I had a great time, and. It's just a great connector because the word but right away is a setup for negativity.
Right. It puts people on edge.
Yeah.
Because whatever you said before the but disappears. And when we use the word and, we remain connected. How about we go to Chinese food tonight? No, I'm not sure in the mood for that. And just like that, with a rising inflection, how about we try something we've never done before? Well, I'm sure this is the best day for that. And A and D is a connector.
Sure.
Peanut butter and jelly, brothers and sisters, parents and children.
Yeah.
When you use an and, even if you follow the word no, someone says da 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 da, no, and keeps us connected rather than against each other.
Yeah, the no is a hard no, and there's nothing wrong with a no when it needs to be served up. But the end at least leaves the door open to either negotiation, or something. Yeah.
Right. A couple came to me, and he had invited her to go to the county park, and she said no, and they got in an argument. But now they have a brand new future. He says, let's go to the county park. And she goes, no. And he goes, and? I need half an hour to finish my hair. This, by the way, is a true story. Where he goes, how about we go to the county park? And she goes, yes, give me about half an hour to finish my hair, then I'll be ready to go. With a no, with a yes and an and, they make it to the park. It's not an exaggeration that without a yes and an and, they come to me.
Interesting. Before we go deeper into relationships with what we're going to talk about today, any other points about communication that even a recap from last week? Anything that we're missing here?
I would add the power of a seems, because we tend to speak declaratively as if everything coming out of my mouth is the truth. However, that gets us into trouble because anyone who's listening to us automatically evaluates what they hear for is it good, is it bad, is it right, is it wrong, do I agree or disagree? And if I talk to my spouse and she doesn't agree, we'll jump to an argument about whose truth is truer, whose reality is most real, and who's right and who's wrong. Communication's gone, listening's gone, and that's where the power of seems. A seems helps us bypass the truth app and allows us to discuss. Yeah, it seems to me we might want to talk about that. It seems to me we bring up the past again and again and again. It seems to me that we tend to say yes when we really mean no. So a seems enables us to discuss in the way that a yes and an and allows us to communicate. Yes and seems is also the curriculum I propose for a high school curriculum. Imagine teenagers being safe if they can just avoid being cool, being accepted, being longing, and they want to be in love, and their body is saying, get pregnant. And they go, yes, let's do this another day. Yes, let's talk about it. Teenagers will be safer if they had a yes and an and as part of their communication protocol, which until this day they do not.
Even the word seems is so impactful because it releases the opinion of it being the truth. Because when you say seems, it's really of your opinion. You know, what seems to be something to me may seem to be something totally different for you. And that's life, as opposed to, you know, for example, Paul, your sweater seems to be blue on my camera here, as opposed to me saying, Paul, your sweater's blue. Well, maybe it's really not on my camera. It may, on my screen, it may look different. Maybe you're wearing gray, but it seems to be blue here.
It's extra peculiar. There's a professor at Stanford University who said that whatever language you're speaking affects how you declare the word color blue. Because a blue to a Russian speaker is not the same as a blue to an English speaker. It's fascinating. Same person, they just switch languages and the colors occur for them differently. So it seems.
Right. And to the Russian, it's a certain color. To the American, it's a certain color. It seems to be. When we talk about the quality of our marriage and our relationships, what influences that? Of course, we identified communication as part of that. What else is a big driver?
Well, if we become familiar with the 5 love languages by Gary Chapman, who distinguishes that people feel loved in slightly different ways. 5 love languages, which is gifts, quality time, physical touch, words, acts of service, and words of affirmation. And you may be convinced that you're loving your spouse in the love language that works for you, but it may not necessarily work for them. For instance, I am quality time and words of affirmation, and my spouse knows that. I know that she's acts of service. She receives love and gives love by taking care of people. And I know that. So when she says, let's change the sheets more frequently than I would, for instance, I'll say, yes, and I'll be there. And then she feels loved. I get a chance to express love. And when I say, let's go off to this local park, she'll say, yes, and give me half an hour to finish my laundry, and I'll be ready to go with you. Acts of service, married to quality time, we dance and have a fine time together. So it's important to learn your 5 love languages by Gary Chapman. And I give couples a copy for them to read aloud together, taking turns, because that's the way they will learn together.
Why are there 5 different languages? Or do we speak in those different languages? I have to go back and restudy that. It's been years. Do we have just certain languages that we all communicate in terms of our love languages, or are there 5 and we just use them differently?
I'm sure when we spent the time, but I think Gary Chapman made the choice just to pick on the 5 big ones, because when you give person acts of service, you feel love giving it to them. And when they return it, you feel love receiving it back. And then the words of affirmation, for some peculiar reason, in these days, we are more or less likely to hear "you're welcome." When you want to appreciate somebody, you say thanks. And sometimes we hear "no prob," "no big deal," "think nothing of it," "I'm good." But the fact is, when you say "you're welcome," there's a connection built. Those connections are pleasurable. To love, feel gratitude, to appreciate one another. When you say there's no prob, there's no life. So in the very first session, they will learn to restore "thank you" and "you're welcome" in their lives. And the minute they do, the energy shifts. All of a sudden, they're smiling and giggling, where before they were "no prob," "think nothing of it," "I'm good." And we go on to build on the whole world of appreciation. Um, when you say, "I appreciate you for being loving," they feel loved. They say, "and I appreciate you for being hardworking and providing for our family." I feel loved. So when we speak each other's love languages, we dance. When we miss the boat, we don't.
Hmm. Do you think that somebody says, no problem? Yeah. Hey, how's it going? No problem. Because they just don't want to engage. They're afraid to go there, or they're afraid of what might be door number two if they open that door.
There's in some ways you could say, no prob is you don't owe me anything for my having served you. No prob. So you're not obligated to do anything back. But that avoidance of the connection is ultimately very damaging to us. So people naturally can express gratitude. It's a leadership skill. And there probably are more love languages and there are probably other ways of taking it. But after about 1,000 couples by this time, at least, as soon as they start "you're welcome," they start on a road to appreciating and being connected with each other.
Hmm.
Gary Chapman talks about keeping your love tank full, and appreciation is one of the ways you do it.
I'm glad you bring that up because a lot of people minimize how impactful gratitude can be, appreciation can be, even in your own life. Even if you just factor your relationship out and just even keep a journal of the things that you're grateful for, it's been scientifically proven that that can, in a period of time, can really change your life. Your thoughts on that?
Well, speak gratitude. I mean, when I was a hospital chaplain in years past, there's always present the janitorial staff. They don't call them that, but that's what they do. And yet they live in a kind of bubble of invisibility. And I would go on to the Tucson Medical Center here in Tucson, and I noticed them. Thanks for pushing that moppy thing. Thanks for bringing a cart. Thanks for pushing a gurney. And for a moment, they were visible. And for a moment, we were connected. And that's the power, that's the kind of world we can build together by noticing and appreciating one ourselves and our children. Because when parents appreciate each other, that's what the children learn too. Gracious people are a gift. And it's easy as "thank you" and "you're welcome."
Hmm. Isn't it funny that, or not, that gets lost in a relationship?
Well, our society seems to have lost something because when I was raised back in the way back when, we used to say "you're welcome" routinely. And yet I hear people say, "I'm more likely to say you're welcome to a stranger than at home." What's with that?
Right.
The other thing I point out to the children, to the couples, I send them to 16personalities.com and they take a version of the Myers-Briggs personality type indicator. And it oftentimes you'll learn 4 letters and 4 percentages, how your partner processes the world, broadly speaking. Some people are analyzed, figure it out first. That's what I do. Something happens and I figure out what's going on here and I make a plan and fulfill the plan. However, my spouse, she responds to the world with her emotions first. And if I'm not aware of that, our boat sinks. A thinker, letter T, might say, "What's the big deal? It's a yes or no question. Why are we spending so much time on this?" And my spouse would say, "Well, I'm not sure how I feel about that. I need some time to sit and think about that. Then I'll get back to you." So the thinker's frustrated, the feeler's frustrated because it sounds like you don't care about them or their feelings. I've seen this hundreds and hundreds of times. Thinkers marry feelers, and they both get upset.
Hmm.
Then there are people who are highly structured. The letter J, for instance. Some people like to know a shopping list. They wouldn't go shopping without a shopping list. The more they know ahead of time, the happier they are. They pack the trunk the night before they leave. But I'm not that quite. I'm a perceiver, letter P, and I love to enjoy shopping for its own sake, not as an accomplishment. And when my spouse says, "Let's pack the trunk at 10 o'clock at night," I say, "Well, at 10 o'clock at night we can pack in the morning." And she says, "No," and I get it that she wants to have it done before she goes to sleep. There's a whole aware world of awareness that allows people to dance together once you know how they tend to process the world. Some people like sensors. They pay attention to rules, regulations, policies, procedures, manuals, and recipes. They just want to know how to do life. They don't really care so much about why and how they do what they do. But if I say to them, "Why do you do it that way?" they think I'm crazy. I want to know why they don't. They want to know how to accomplish life. Thank you very much. And the book I'm writing is called Marriage and Communication Recipes for Life, literally describing these skills as a recipe, as if you're making a cake. Only the
Hmm.
cake is your marriage. It'll be out shortly.
Hmm. Interesting. So it would be the ingredients for each different category in the recipe.
Exactly. Yeah, lay stands and seams. I make a little box for a recipe. And if you're interested in learning more, keep reading. But if you do yes ands and seams, you'll get the cake. You don't have to know why. For you, yes and, let's talk about that. You'll get a relationship. So it's the two pieces, recipe and then how come.
Why, Paul, do you think that marriages fall apart after a number of years? Things seem good in the beginning, maybe there's a little bit of uh, challenge, and then 10, 15 years later, um, things start dissolving. The red light comes on on the dashboard, so to speak. Why does that
Well,
happen?
well, in the beginning of a relationship, not to mention hormones and things and love and sex and all that good stuff, you have careers and you have families and you make the compromises for career and families. And if you don't pay attention to your relationship, by the time you hit 15 years married and you're about to be an empty nester, you've lost track of who you're married to. Who is that? So the trick is to sustain your marriage as a couple, even as you're having careers and families to raise. And often there's a mischief. I don't know how much time we have left, but we have influences from childhood that often don't belong in the life of an adult. A quick example is that one person whose father never said he loved her, ever. She tried to please this guy the entire length of her childhood. And so by the time she becomes an adult, she has a PhD in "I am not good enough." Life occurs to her as she's not good enough. She wakes up with not good enough. She goes to sleep with more not good enough. And in between waking up and going to sleep, she gathers corroboration. Someone looks at her funny, she gets, "No, I'm not good enough." Her husband gets into an argument. "I'm definitely not good enough." And so until we can distinguish these threads that trace all the way back to our childhood experiences, she'll be not good enough and marry someone who doesn't know what's going on. One couple, his family cheated on each other. Her family's cheating on each other. Her brother's cheating on her sister-in-law as we speak. And so her radar is set on cheat. She looks for cheating behavior. She looks for cheating hints. And God forbid he looks at a waitress for 5 seconds too long and kaboom. And he walks on eggshells around her because he never knows what's going to set her off. So until we can distinguish that, well, cheating is about to happen anytime now, just wait long enough, it'll happen. She's driven. Her life is influenced by looking for cheating. And she'll find evidence if she looks. Every one of us has this. My inner 5-year-old says, "No one cares what I want," which is hard to give me a gift because I usually get it for myself at a time. So once you know your love languages, your personality types, and distinguish some of the influences left over from when you were 5 years old or younger, or previous marriages, we can move on together to have an adult relationship that lasts a lifetime. I promise it, I guarantee it. It is a lot of fun and not difficult whatsoever.
And there's so much involved in here, even to your example of somebody suspecting that their partner is cheating. It's very possible that they came from a broken family and maybe felt that they were abandoned. So now they're worried again. Gonna happen again. Oh, I got to keep an eye on this one. Yeah, because I feel like I'm not good enough. Number one. Number two, there's abandonment issues. So I don't want that ever to happen again. So I got to keep my eye on my spouse there. There might not even be a reason for you
Instead
to
of
have it.
living your life, you're living a life colored and shaped by your past, which really isn't living your life now.
Sure, sure. But unknown to you, that is the challenge. Yeah, you may have known your parents got divorced when you were young. Maybe you have abandonment issues, but you don't even know you have them. They just show up in your adult life, which I'm sure is something that you can help somebody identify.
In around the third or fourth session of the five, we will actually get a whole lot of freedom against these hitherto undistinguished influences. Because once you know what's going on, you can rewrite your future. We live in language. And when we can say, I used to, but now we can open up doors to whole brand new vistas of relationship. I promise it. It's one of the most fun sessions is to get rid of the past so we can live in the
Mhm.
present.
It's got to feel so liberating during that session when you finally realize with your help what was going on, why you were acting the way you were.
I have lots of things to say. That's why it takes five sessions. But it's an incredibly enlivening ride. Couples walk in with less life, they walk out with more life. I guarantee it.
Now you mentioned before, and we're gonna talk about in just a moment the sessions and the five, how that all works. But I want to go back to you mentioned cheating. When that happens in a relationship, it's often believed that, oh, well, the person's needs weren't being met, whether it's physical, emotional, whatever.
Mhm. Yeah.
Is
Well,
it, but is it often many times the person who did the cheating more on them because they had unresolved things in their life, maybe from their childhood?
first of all, first thing I mentioned is that cheating is a symptom, not a cause. So the question, the relevant is, what is the symptom of? And the realm of the five love languages, I find the most cheese, shall we say, because he calls me up one day. There's something wrong with my wife. And it turns out that he's been busy paying attention to his business. She wants to spend quality time. So she finds quality time with something else, somebody else. And then he notices that and calls me up. So really, it's the context of a marriage is in us. The language we choose, the behaviors we choose, the awareness of one another. We actually create a dashboard for marriage, much like the dashboard of a car. Something, you have a check engine light. You know what to do when you're driving down the road. But what do you do when you have a check engine light in your marriage? That's what we get. You get a dashboard for marriage that will guide you through the rest of your life with any relationship, anywhere, with anybody.
I have a really good friend and known him for years. So I have a different view of his relationship. He got divorced. Um, but as he would explain it, everything kind of traced back to his wife's father. Left the family when they were very young. Um, then she got married to this guy, actually the second marriage. Things are okay. And then he discovered that she was cheating and she was estranged from her father. They eventually got back together again. She eventually, after they went to counseling, she eventually just said one day, I'm getting divorced. That's it. No sign coming. And as he looks at it and traces all the steps back, her father did the same thing. He just up and left. There was a lot of unresolved things there. And wouldn't you know it, he shows me a picture of the guy she's with now. And I knew his father-in-law. They look like the same person. She's with her father again in many regards.
Sometimes this goes for generations, like
Yeah,
alcoholism or domestic violence. Grandpa did it to Pop, Pop did it to my mother, I do it to my spouse.
right.
We get sometimes an opportunity to break the chain of generation behavior because they swear, I'll never raise my kid the way that way. But then they go ahead and do it because
Yeah.
So we do the work, which is what I offer at Marriage and Communication. You're pretty much inevitably reproducing the past with which you're most familiar.
Yes. Yeah. And you might not even know you're doing it. More times you don't.
Most people don't.
Most
They
people
just
don't. So
they make up something when they're 5 years old, and it influences their life forever.
and that,
Until
the time we have left, we're almost out of time. Tell us about the 5 sessions, how that works with you, Paul.
Well, there are 5 sessions of approximately an hour and a half each, though the first one tends to run a little bit long, up to 2 hours. And they're about 2 weeks apart. And in between the weeks, they download the behaviors of marriage communication. They get to install it and live it at home. And they come back for the next dose about 2 weeks later. It could be 3 weeks. I see a number of people who are in the military and they get deployed and other things happen, or people's outside out for business, but 2 to 3 weeks apart over the course of about 2 months. I will promise you'll have the access to your 50th wedding anniversary with grace and ease.
Wow.
It's not difficult, it's enlivening, and one heck of a lot of fun.
In the lives that we lead nowadays, where I call it the Amazon world, everything is just quick, one click, gotta go. I love the fact that you break it down to the 5 sessions. We have the expectations, how it's going to work. You've been doing this with hundreds, thousands couples. You know what works. It's not just let me pick out 5 sessions and we'll be great. No,
there's a structure. And learning how to apologize is important because most people don't know how to apologize. They say, I'm sorry, which isn't an apology. An apology is an apology. Once you know how to apologize, you can clean up on aisle 3 with great ease.
Really good point.
I could go on for hours, and I'd love the opportunity to teach in schools to the professionals. I'd love to talk to corporations, because when your employee brings his marriage to your workplace, your performance is diminished. You lose money when their teenager is showing up in your workplace. So it's really a universal skill. Skills, churches, community, civic, Rotary clubs, I will make myself available. And by the way, I've helped people internationally because this can be accomplished by Zoom, like we're here. I had a couple in Austria, another couple in Florida and in Ohio. So is it best to be here face to face? Sure. But it is coaching. I get to coach you. It doesn't matter whether you're in Austria or here in Tucson. So call me up. We'll make something work.
And interesting, we talk about how to apologize in a relationship, marriage, partnership, but that also transcends even to the business. When something goes wrong, how to properly apologize to the client. So there's a lot of strength in all of that.
No, the people will not remember what you said. They'll remember how you left them feeling. It's been said.
I always operate under that one, and I actually said that on Friday to somebody because it's true. Paul, how do we find you?
Happy wife, happy life. I'm sure you said that too. You can contact me at marriageandcommunication.com. You can hit me. There's a contact sheet, and for immediate, like you're in an emergency situation, call me up at 520-297-3085, and we'll create something in the moment. I work 6 days a week. As early as 8:30 in the morning, as late as 6:30 in the evening. And if there's urgency and emergency, I'll even have a session on Sundays too. I get up in the morning to do this. This is where my joy and accomplishment comes in by helping couples make it to their 50th wedding anniversary.
Well, this is your life's purpose, and
it is.
And it truly shows. Paul, thanks for being with us. Truly appreciate it, and looking forward next time we get together. There's lots to talk about.
Lots.
Yep.
And call me, 520-297-3085. I promise to answer. And I'm in the mountain time zone. But even if you call me in the middle of the night, I'm likely to pick up anyways.
Gotcha. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Happy New Year again to everybody who's listening.
Happy New Year. We're coming right back.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.